Hey, folks. Thanks for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. Great seeing you all here today. I have a special treat for you. Of course, you know I always bring the treats. The best part about this thing, it was what is now the Spanish Legion, the Legionarios, cantando El Novio de la Motra. And it's in Malaga, Spain, in 2016. I will put a link in the description. I used this song when I talked to Cutsy. It was a great show. This will be a better show. Well, they're all good. I mean, shoot, I don't know what's better. Nothing's better. Everything's just good and awesome. But the point is, I'm bringing back my brother Baz, and we're talking about at the beginning of this traditions in different militaries. And me being a Marine, I'll talk as soon as Baz is done. But at this point, Baz, why don't you introduce yourself, and I will mute myself until you're done explaining the traditions you experienced within the British service.
Yeah, thanks for that, brother. It's good to be back on the show. It's been a while. I've been busy away doing a bit of work. Yeah, it's I've been looking forward to this show because obviously the differences between our services, both as nations and then each nation's sort of service traditions. Some of them go back hundreds of years. Some of them are quite new. We've recently had a change in the British military where we had regiments of the British Army, who I was a part of. That some of these regiments had not had their history altered in over 350, 300 odd years. My regiment was formed in the 1600s, and it was basically an unbroken line all the way back from the 1600s. We were unamalgamated. We were one of the senior regiments in the British Army up until about 2006, where I don't know what drove the decision, but the decision was made to sort of rid most of the regiments of their sort of like their identity and regimental history, and move into sort of a more sort of structured way of doing things. Like we had, for example, my regiment became a part of sort of a regional regiment. We had like sort of 3 battalions. Now those 3 battalions, each one of them had their own identity for hundreds and hundreds of years, and different traditions where it was like little nuances, little niches that no other regiment used to have. And in 2006, they decided to get rid of them all, which created a bit of an upset, to be honest. Because if you think you've got these staunch traditions that people have lived by, bled and died by, and all of a sudden, just overnight, they were expected to accept this new way of doing things. And the civilian world's good at change. The military world isn't so good at change when it comes to things like traditions and how we do our work and things like that. Operationally, we're very fluid in the way we do things like that. Good at change because that's just the nature of warfare. But when it comes to our daily sort of routine, the way that we parade, the way we march, the way we dress, it's very set in history and set in traditions of each regiment. So yeah, it was upsetting to see, especially for the old and bold like myself,
Right.
And and those before me. My comrades in arms who had got out of the military long before I joined the army. So it was like a slap in the face for them. But I'm glad to say that I was one of the very last of my regiment before it changed to the new way of doing things. And it's only sort of now, 10, 15 years later, that the pride of each regiment is coming back again, because 10, 15 years ago, there were basically new regiments. We were told to forget our history, which it's like telling Easy Company, the 501st, forget Bastogne, forget Carentan. You
Right.
know, exactly like that. Like we had obviously we had battle honours going all the way back to, from the 1600s. You know, we were the only regiment in the entire British Army on D-Day to win a Victoria Cross. That's like saying someone from your regiment in the American forces was the only person to win a Medal of Honor on D-Day. You know what I mean? That's the sort of significance of that. And then we'd been told to forget that. You know, it's quite hard to do. But since then, obviously, we've had Afghanistan, we've had Iraq, and other conflicts and operations around the world. So there is sort of, you know what I mean? We're building history back up, but it'll take a long, long time before the pride that we felt when I was a young soldier, private soldier, lance corporal. You know, if someone turned around and badmouthed my regiment, they got their heads kicked in. You
Yeah,
know what
it's
I
a
mean?
fight.
There was if no buts about it. It was like someone walking up and calling your mother a whore. You know what I mean? It was, and I'm not talking like one of your friends. You know, your mum's a whore. You know what I mean? Because that's just banter between comrades in arms, and we know it's not malicious. But let's say it was akin to someone from the street that you've never known walking up to you, spitting in your face, saying your mother's a fucking whore. You know, that's how seriously we took that shit.
Well,
If anybody, even if they were serving British military, especially if they're serving British military, because there was a sort of like a lot of rivalry between units, and if someone came up to us and said your unit's a bag of shit, they were put in hospital, no ifs no buts. And,
yeah.
and if someone did that and you let it slide, then your comrades would be onto you, and you'd be walking away with blood pissing out your nose. You know what I mean? Because you just let someone get away with it. So, yeah,
Yeah, we had
go on,
a
brother.
complete thought process. I'm getting some feedback on your Umbra. We had a complete process where even a shipbird, a foul de feces, somebody who was a non-hacker or whatever, right? We could talk within our own unit to them, but if somebody even picked on a shitbird, all of us would stand against those people. And the private bullshit that we would have is private within a family. It really is like being a family. And that's why I talk, well, you and I both talk about mentoring so much, because that's how the traditions get inculcated. I mean, a lot of people don't know the blood stripe on a Marine Corps NCO's pants is from the Battle of Chapultepec, and that happened in Mexico. And you also have, just as a board of reference for people, on Cameroon Day, that was Cameroon, Mexico, and that was the French Foreign Legion's day where they carry out Colonel Mailloux, or I probably butchered his name, but his wooden hand. It's an artifact of it. And they dress up, some in bibs, leather bibs, and carry axes on the march on Cameroon Day. That's the day where they fought, and honestly, they ran out of bullets, and they were not going to be captured, and they all fell on each other's bayonets. They got in a big circle with their bayonets facing their brothers, and they all collapsed onto each other's bayonet. That's why they have the Order of the Bayonet. The point is, just like with what you were talking about, the important part of that is that just like the Marine Corps officer's sword that looks so funky and out of place, other than the NCO Cavalry sword, which was U.S. Army before it was Marine, that sword was given to Presley O'Bannon, a lieutenant, because when they invaded Tripoli, remember, from the halls of Montezuma, which is Chapultepec, to the shores of Tripoli, and that was when they were trying to impress. And when I mean impress, I mean press our men, our sailors, into service for the Islamist. And it was Thomas Jefferson, who was the most anti-war person, who sent in the Marines to do it. And Presley O'Bannon took the Marines onto the shore of Tripoli, defeated the Barbary pirates, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he was he's a Muslim guy, so figure out the Muslim name. You guys can look it up. It's very easy. I just am mind dumping now because I'm old. But that's how the Mameluke sword that the officers carry, was given to them because that was an award that this chieftain, prince, whatever he was, I can't even remember all that crap. But I know that that's Presley O'Bannon got that sword, and that's why the officers to this day carried a Mameluke sword. And your thoughts, brother, before we jump into the main topic?
Yeah, so it's really good to see and hear a lot of another unit's history, and why we do things and why our uniform is the way that we had it or have it or had it. Um, my regiment, it's called like the regimental day is Alma Day, and it comes from sort of one of the battles that we fought in the Crimean War, where we were going up against obviously the Russians. And basically, what we did, we marched 27 miles, and then took 14 guns in 45 positions, and we actually captured the Russian drums, and they're actually still on shore in our officers and warrant officers and sergeants mess. Is these guns. Well, obviously we captured the colours as well, so that's our regimental day. A lot of Victoria Crosses were won back then, and I think it was about 1855. And that was one of the just one of the battles of that our regiment was a part of. And each different regiment's got its own day. Like the regiment I've just been working with just before I left the army, they had Quebec Day, and they did something called Quebec Breakfast, where all the warrant officers and the senior NCOs went to the mess at 6 o'clock in the morning, like Reveille. And basically, what you did then, you obviously what we did, we toast the Queen, toast the regiment with glasses of port, and this is at like silly o'clock in the morning. And then you have this massive breakfast called the Quebec breakfast, and basically it was like the big breakfast before they went to battle. And then basically you're just drinking all day. You have a regimental photo just after the toast, and then you have another regimental photo 12 hours later, at 1800 at night, and basically it's called the survivors photo. Basically whoever's left, and what it comes from is a photograph was taken, one of the when cameras were ancient, a photograph was taken of the regiment before the battle, and then after the battle, i.e. the survivors photograph, and obviously those who had fallen in
Right.
battle weren't on the photograph. So again, it's sort of like it pays homage to that. If you can't handle your liquor and your beer, you're not in the survivors photograph at the end, and it's sort of like a right of honour to make the survivors photograph. And there's no flagging during the day. You are just fucking piling drinking. There's no one drinking soft drinks or anything like that. You're on port, you're on liquor, you're on beer all day. And it's a messy old day, but it's a good day because at the end of the day, you know why you're there, and they always do sort of a reenactment, and it's more sort of like a skit, comedy reenactment. A couple of guys will get dressed up as the enemy. Some of us will get dressed up in the old red coats and stuff like that. And if there's a body of water on our barracks, it'll be the guys will make a little makeshift boat to get across the river to do to have the battle, like this reenactment, and it's all in all in jest, but there's this element of serious behind it. At the end of the day, you're there to toast to the fallen comrades and
Yeah,
just remember the history of unit. Yeah, and that's just two regiments. Every regiment's different. You know what I mean?
yeah. That's exactly like what we see in either a dining out, which we have a whole tradition on that in the Marine Corps, and also the Marine Corps birthday. And it's similar. I don't know. They probably Nancified it a little bit. I hope they haven't. Where it was basically a drunk fest. I mean, there's a meal, there's a birthday cake cut, there's ceremony, all that stuff. But it's an awesome time that it builds bonds and it builds tradition and it builds a brotherhood. And with that being said, if you have some final things, please add them but we're going to transition into the topic of the day because we've covered that a little bit and we
Yeah,
can cover it more at the end of this.
yeah.
But the simplicity when you live in a suitcase, backpack, or a little bag. And that's our topic. So please feel free at this point to finish what you wanted to say on your point. I'll mute and I'll come back and we'll discuss, you can delve into the basic topic of it also, brother.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Yeah, so it's just important that we remember our regimental history, um, of our each separate regiments, even down to your platoons. Our platoon, six platoon, we were called fighting six, filthy six, but it was always six gang or six gang mafia. And it's just again there's that rivalry, not just in your company because you want to be the best platoon, but in your battalion you want to be the best company, and then again in the army you just want to be like our regiment is the best. No one fights as hard as or drinks as much as our regiment does. And it's just pride. And I think we always need to remember that no matter what happens with our regiment, that history will always be a part of who we are. Because that regiment doesn't disappear. It just changes name, it changes badge or whatever. And it's always important that we remember those who have gone before us. Yeah, so I think that's all we'll say on that because again that could be a discussion for another day. Learning the history of each other's units and things like that. But I think we need to get on to our sort of main part of call is the life out of bag box or ruck. It's a way of life and it takes some adjustment, as I'm finding now after 24, 25 years in the military. I mean, you've lived a massive amount of your life, brother, doing the same, and it becomes, like I say, it becomes your way of life, and you find it hard to adjust. Otherwise, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Oh, it's not there. Okay, so ever since a young soldier, you taught to pack everything in your bag, your ruck, whatever, and you taught to live off that. And if you can't live off that, you're living what's around your waist, your belt kit. And as you progress on in your career, you titivate, you load out your packing list and things like that. You know what to take and not what to take. And down the line, I've learned to live out of a bag and a box with an element of
Yep.
comfort. You know what I mean? It's not just taking things just for the mission. If you need to be effective and enjoy what you're doing, you need to have an element of comfort as well. And that element of comfort might be just something small. That might be an inflatable pillow, a deck of cards, up until depending on what you're doing and what your location is, you can start expanding things like that just to make your life a bit easier, and it gives you that sort of like element or that opportunity to take your head out of out of the game, if you know what I mean, because you can't just constantly be on standby on the
Right.
operational edge 24/7. I mean, you've spent, like I was saying there, you've spent a good portion of your life living out of a box and a bag. I mean, have you found it hard to sort of like adjust to not doing that? Because I certainly have.
Oh, hell yeah. Here's the whole point of that, brother. On the real, I've run into dudes who get ate up with the dumb shit that they're constantly worried. They're looking behind their back. They're on. Honestly, it's unnerving being around them. It's paranoia, honestly. And there's a difference between situational awareness and paranoia. And those Joes definitely got paranoia. And that's one of the things I always caution people about because it's such a delicate balance to be situationally aware or to be paranoid. And it really is truly a shame when everything you say, everything you do, everybody you interact with, when you you know the difference. If you're dealing with somebody and you that gut feeling of this is not an honest broker, there's something odd about it, you listen to that. I've talked to people and tell them this is going back to my gray man programs back in the day with Georgios and everybody. I did several of them where everybody, you can always tell the cops or the people who are SF or something, they're always sitting to where they can see both exits. But they don't think the gray man sits at the bar and the mirror gives them the rear view, both exits, everything's covered, and they can nurse that. Nobody's counting how many shots you're drinking unless they're actually a collector. And that's the difference. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. It's that field craft that comes with experience and time in the field. You can be taught fieldcraft to a certain extent, but to hone it to the point where what you're doing, you're basically running your counter surveillance, you're running your security, all without raising any alarms. You're doing it in a way that you just look your average butt fuck, having a couple of drinks at the bar, drowning his sorrows, whatever, and it comes as habit as well. Like I went out for dinner with a friend a few days ago, and it was just habit. Now we're both ex-soldiers, so it's like, right, who's gonna fucking face the exits? So there's that argument, or that sort of like that mental argument that you look at each other and you're just like, both of you go for the same chair. You know what I mean? So again, it's just getting out of those habits. But again, if you spend so long in the environment that we have, you're never going to lose those habits because let's be honest, we're fucking dysfunctional.
Right.
You're never going to drop that habit because you will always want to know where those exits are. You always want to be able to get a clock someone coming in and out. Who's coming in and out this establishment I'm going to be in? For us, it was good because obviously we're Northern Ireland and things like that. It's not like Iraq or Afghanistan where once you're off mission, you're on base, and any time you leave base, it's either in an armoured vehicle or another vehicle on patrol or in a helicopter. In Northern Ireland, we were going out and we were mixing with the civilian population. We were going out drinking and yada, yada, yada. You know what I mean? So that was bred into us, even as just normal soldiers. Even normal soldiers were getting that bred into them.
Well,
Because if you don't have your head on a swivel, you're going to get stuffed into a black taxi and your knees shot off. You
yep.
know what I mean?
Well, I find that I do still have. I will tell you my one holdover, and I think it's a good holdover. If I'm going to a supermarket or going to a store, right? I park at the farthest away place where nobody parks except for maybe the egotistical Camaro owner or Corvette owner or BMW owner or Mercedes owner that doesn't want anybody to hit their vehicle and park sideways in the spot. I'll park there so as I approach, I can see anybody in vehicles around it. I can see anything that might be under my vehicle as I come up. And I'm also able to drive straight out. And that's the key. I mean, that is paranoia in a way, but it's also situational awareness. I walk my car around, you walk your car around to look for things. And I still do that. I mean, that's not a bullshit answer. That's me telling you the truth. It boggles the mind that these basics, I honestly believe, have been neglected. And
I agree. I agree. It's not something that's really touched on as much nowadays. Is that sort of like PERSEC, OPSEC, counter surveillance, just basic fieldcraft. I mean, it is taught to a certain sort of element of the military and security services, doing work where they can be expected to be targeted in plain clothes. Like your SF, your intelligence services, yada yada yada. It becomes second nature, and it depends what you've done in your past as well. Like
right.
you've done things in your past where counterintelligence and obviously the awareness of like, look, I could be targeted at any time. You know what I mean? It's just like what we used to say about the IRA. So the IRA used to say to us is, you've got to be lucky every time. We've only got to be lucky once.
Once. Yep.
Yeah, you know. So even to this day, it depends on where I'm parking. Um, as I'm approaching my vehicle, I'll drop my keys purposely,
Yeah.
and then I'll accidentally kick my keys. Though I might just go a foot or so under my car, so I can
Yep.
actually get down and like fish around for my keys. It's just to have a look about, checking the wheel wells. Or what we was like taught in Northern Ireland is, if you're not sure, you can't actually go and check under your car because it'll compromise you. Just pretend to answer your phone, or just go and sit on your what you call the trunk. You know what I mean, of the
Yeah.
vehicle, because if there's anything in the vehicle, the chances are it's going to be underneath the driver's seat. If you go to the rear corner opposite the driver's seat, like diagonally away, if you do like put your weight on the car, and if it's tilt switch or anything like that, and a device goes off, you've got a larger or a better ratio of survivability, because you're the furthest point away from the device without actually getting on your hands and knees and looking underneath your vehicle, which will completely compromise you. Not just to those who are observing you, but to everybody else around you, because everybody else around you is obviously aware of the threat most times. If you're working in an environment where there's that element of hostility, you know what I mean?
It's all TDS, man. Time distance shielding. And you're exactly right, because more than likely you're going to get some TBI, traumatic brain injury, from being thrown from the explosion, but you're not in a car. You're not in that confined area where the explosive has more kinetic energy to fuck you up and dismember you. You may get some burns. You may get a lot of things, but your likelihood of survival, you're exactly correct, is much higher. I used to tie my shoe on the back of the vehicle and
Yeah,
put more weight on it. You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
We also, after going out in hard cars in Iraq and other places in the Near East, what we would do is we would actually go buy, in Iraq specifically, a taxi, grab a snatch van, which was nothing more than a tinted out windowed Toyota van with a sliding door on the side. And we'd get a Hilux truck. And they were all beat up. So they may have gotten a word that, hey, these guys are coming to you. But we'd space ourselves out too and let traffic kind of intermingle, but where we could still support each other
mm,
and keep an eye on things. And guess what? We never got shot at again, never got blown up again. It was super easy. And it's about using the brain housing group. Not, look, you and I both know the worst thing to do is to use firearms. We don't like to do it. We are not the people that want to do that. And that's not our place. Our place is to figure out the job, get it done, and be done with it. And that's it. And I'm
yeah.
going to mute because I got to go out one more time, and, well, a couple more times. But, it's to let everybody in on our little secret. When I say carry on with something, what's happening is I'm actually barbecue grilling, and Baz is chilling out, having a good night. Just got home, had an epic job, and that's it. So please carry on, brother, if you could.
Yeah, it's like you say there. The last thing you want to be doing is going kinetic. Is putting rounds down the range, because as soon as you do that, you've failed your mission. Because now you're in a completely different sort of setting. And this is if you're working in an environment where there's an element of covert activity, or where it's really low profile. And I keep going back to things like Northern Ireland, because I spent a lot of my time in Northern Ireland, where we drove around in just normal civilianized vehicles. And they're just normal cars, saloon cars, coupes, vans, and things like that. But obviously they were up armoured, and some of these had obviously engine modifications. But from the outside, they're just the normal car that you see driving around the road. Um, we weren't you wearing uniform. We all had longer hair. I drove a lot of the time in just what we have over there, the transit van, looking just like a building contractor with loads of newspapers and burger wrappers in there. Had a set of ladders on the roof, and if you look like you belong, then the chances are you're going to be more effective in achieving your overall intent. But again, if you aren't paying attention to what you're doing, and it's just stupid little things, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Um, you're going to find very quickly that your intent is pretty much in jeopardy, because now you've got to deal with something else, a set of risks and threats that you need to deal with before you even think about getting back on task. And the chances are, like I said, to get back on task is pretty much it's a non-issue if you're working in an environment where you are incognito, because all of a sudden now you are compromised. And now that means one or two things. That means either you as an individual or a team are compromised, especially in this sort of a very close environment like Northern Ireland, where these people in some of these areas have known each other all their lives. They're very wary of strangers. If you think you're going to a small town in some backwater county in the US, where everybody's known everybody all their lives, and all of a sudden these new people there and they're acting suspicious, you're going to be outed quite quickly. Now you think you put that in a hostile setting where there's a terrorist environment, you know what I mean? So you need to be on top of your game. And it's absorbing how they do things as well. It's that pattern of life. If you're doing things out of the ordinary, then you're going to stand out. Like a lot of our vehicles in Northern Ireland were getting compromised, and nobody could work out why. And it's because their VRM plate, their number plate, where they put the bolts in or the screws in to fix it to the vehicle. If you've ever seen a Brit number plate, it's a lot different from the US one. Our rear ones are yellow and black. Now, if you had a screw going into where one of the letters were, and the letters are black, the screw had to have a black cap on it. And it was just the part of the sort of like what we call an MOT over here to make sure that your vehicle's roadworthy. If it had a yellow cap, it means that basically it could fail an MOT, and it's just a lack of detail. And that's how a lot of our vehicles were getting compromised, because when the military vehicles, they don't have to go through an MOT as such, so it's a bit less lax. So that's how a lot of our guys were getting compromised, because it's just that lack of attention to detail. But we're digressing. We're going to keep on to this the thread of living and fighting out of a box or a bag. And this, what ways why we're digressing is because it brings back to it. It's just that attention to detail that that you learn over experience and time. Of how to.
Right.
I mean, there's no point taking 6 knives with you. You always work off a bit of redundancy, but 2 knives is enough. If you're going to your knife and one's broken and you're going to another knife, then something's seriously going wrong. But you can't take 2 of everything,
Right.
unless it's spare socks, because you're on your feet as a soldier, no matter where you're at, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're a paramedic, whether you're a soldier, whether you're even working in humanitarian. A lot of the time you're going to be spent on your feet, and if you're ineffective at doing that, then you aren't going to achieve your intent.
Well, you and I did that epic show on what blades were, the difference between blades and different things, and it's the truth that with what we covered. I will carry 2 of one is none. But when I say that, I may have a Hest fixed blade knife, and I may have an Hest F, a folder that goes in my pocket. They're both small blades. They're not attracting a lot of attention. There's other manufacturers that make small blade knives, but I'm a fan of the Hest for reasons. RYP I happen to know him. But then you can also, if you want to really get stupid about it, in your pack, you can put in, let's say, an artifact from Gerber, which is nothing more than a razor knife. It has extra blades, So if you do have to get some game, you're not dulling the blade on game, or if you have to cut cardboard open for packages, you can just, it's like an X-Acto blade, brother. And so you're not doing anything with that if you have that, and it doesn't raise any attention because it's so small, and it also has a little pry bar situation happening with it, and screwdriver, this, that, and the other, and then a multi-tool, a SOG, a Gerber, a daggone,
Leatherman.
a Leatherman, and they also have toolkits for them where you can actually screw things and add additional items to it. So there's so much out there that you're exactly right, man. You don't have to get lost in the sauce, and it's easier to explain away those type of items than it is anything else. They don't need to know anything. They'll see your American passport. Hopefully you don't have short hair and you don't look like, some sort of contractor, military tosser. You just look like a regular dude. And you always have the excuse of camping. Hey, even a spade. I have several spades, shovels for the American audience, that fold up. And guess what? It can be easily explained with a tarp and some other things. My brother's here. We're going to go camp out in the jungle. We're going to camp out in the desert. We're going to do some things. And it's explainable. And, when you're carrying body armor, helmets, all this stuff, that stuff, we'll deal with that in another show. But that's kind of the thing, as how you keep, just like in my picture. You've seen the picture already. I've already posted it. Yeah. I have my expired passport. Guess what? That has a lot of countries in there. I don't want everybody to know I've been there that many times. So am I going to travel with that one or the new one? I'm going to travel with the new one. If they're legitimately curious and they have an agreement with our nation, they'll be able to go to the Department of State and see every stamp you've put in your Department of Interior, or I don't know what you guys call it. Your Department of State. I can't even think about what you call it in England.
We've got customs and excise. And obviously you go through customs like you do in the States. It depends on what sort of agency monitor entry and exit of your nation and different nations. But I've fallen foul of it before, where I thought I've been somewhere. I won't say off reservation,
right?
But let's just say in not official
right
duties, if you know what I mean.
You're not.
Right. Yeah, it's been for monetary gain. Okay, I'm not working for the army. I'm on leave for X amount of weeks, and I've been offered a task abroad. Without saying too much, I thought I got away with it. 3 weeks later, I was called into an office at work where there was a member of my unit there and a member of another agency there saying, "Why are you going here teaching these people skills and drills when you're still a paid up member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces?"
Yep.
I was lucky that I was able to talk my way out of it, and I was assured that the job I was on, there was no photographs taken or anything like that. That wasn't so.
Right.
But less I say about that, the better.
Yeah.
But I was lucky to get away with it. That's what I'm getting around. A lot of the times, you're not so lucky, especially if you're in a foreign country, you fall foul to foreign customs, foreign laws, and things like that. I know it used to be quite a big deal if you have an Israeli stamp in your passport.
Yep.
Getting into some Arab countries, vice versa. Why have you been there? Why have you been there? Why have you been there? Like, for example, if you're a serving member of the American military, and you come back to work after being on a period of leave, and you've got a Chinese stamp in your passport, it will raise questions somewhere down the line. It might not be
Right.
overtly, but it'll be, why is a serving member of the armed forces, the American or the British armed forces, going to China? Because as far as I understand, I know it's with our military, there's certain places in the world you need to get clearance to go to, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. And I would dare say it's the same in your military, just because our militaries are paranoid, you know.
Yes.
The
Well, yours
fucking
is less
the
paranoid than ours. I mean, honestly, the American military has taken paranoia to a new level, especially after 9/11.
yeah.
And, getting a visit by people, you're just like, yeah, whatever, man. Um, that's another thing. With those kinds of visits, normally, if they don't know what they think they know, they'll come up with a big ass file and act like they know stuff. But it's usually some moron that that saw a picture or whatever and then made a complaint. And then they're fishing. And as long as you're honest, in America at least, as long as you're honest, they can't get you on 1001 because that's lying. That's the easy, low hanging fruit. And that's another thing we always push on my channel, you and I both: honor, integrity, and loyalty. And just because something appears one way does not mean it is that way. And we both had to, in certain ways, put ourselves in situations that a non initiate would think, wow, what the hell is up with him? And sometimes it goes pretty deep. Sometimes you got to sacrifice things. But you always keep your family, you keep your friends, your loved ones far away from it. You don't tell them, come with me, let's go do this. And say, come with me and stand by my side. If that's the whole thing. That's the nexus, and we're both getting on grounds we shouldn't talk to about. But yeah, man, it just boggles the mind how small-minded people can be because they don't realize everything you see. And I do blame this on the media. Look, right now, man, they're calling Tulsi Gabbard. Look, I would love to have her. I would love to have President Trump say, ma'am, can you please leave the Congress and replace John Bolton? Because I like her position on war. I'm being very honest. I can disagree with her in a lot of things, but I think she's a soldier. She has served twice in a combat zone. And I would love to have her replace John Bolton. I'm not going to lie. But when you have Obama and Biden are now Nazis, they're far right. Can you even believe that? Obama was a Maoist. Same with his wife. But they deported more people. See how ancillary and bullshit politics. It's exactly correct. With what? Oh shoot! Why am I mind dumping his name? Politics is war is the end where politics. War is the final part where politics ends, but it's still political. Karl von Clausewitz, that's who said that. And it is the final end. And it's something that people who have experienced it don't want to see. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and again, it'll bring us back on the track where we're going with this, because it's a certain type of person that has to go and do this. It's a certain type of person, like you said, that makes a sacrifice, that doesn't take his loved ones and those close to him into his world, into his environment. It's like you'd live two separate lives. It's like if anybody's listening to this and they've been on operational tour, or they've spent a good period of time away from their family with their work, and their work has an element of threat, an element of danger, where life, limb, mental well-being is in jeopardy, then it's like once you kiss your wife and kids, your mum, dad, brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, goodbye, and then you go and do what you're going to do, you press pause. You press pause on that, and you start living another life completely until that intent has been met. You press stop, pause, whatever on that, and then come back to that life that you press pause on and press play. And it's hard to slot back into that because these people have didn't press pause. They're living their life, but it's keeping those away from that, and it brings us back to like what you said there is there's a type of person that has to go and do that. You know, um, war is interesting for those who have had no experience of it. Or it's along those lines. It's an old adage of a very old sort of like military philosopher Erasmus, I think he was called, from over 1,000 years ago. You know, and again, it brings us back onto the mindset of living out of a box and a bag, and it's that's just a synonym for those who stand in harm's way or do their duties, where you're leaving the comfort zone of your house, where you've put roots down, the family stead, whatever, and you're accepting that for the next foreseeable future, this thing that I carry in my arms is going to keep me one alive, warm, fed, sane, and it's going to keep that intent that I'm here to do achievable, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? Because whatever you carry, whether it's just a bag that you carry through the airport with spare clothes and a wash kit in it, or whether it's your belt kit with your water bottle, your magazines, your grenades, and your machete, it's you got to live out of that, and you've got to learn how to do that effectively. You can take every gadget under the sun. These tactical fools that buy shit off eBay and Amazon and fucking Chris Costa's website, whatever, you can have all the gear in the world, but it's what you need is what you need. Again, I've said it before on one of our shows, brother, is when I was going away, if I had something, or sorry, rephrase that, if I didn't have something I needed, I'd always keep quiet about it because I don't want to look a cunt, you know. And I've got those around me that look up to me, and if they see me suffer, me bitching because I've left something behind, what example does it set to them?
It sets
It's
no example. You're right.
the only example it will set is a bad one. If he does it, I'm going to try and get away with it. And I've seen it happen in the past. We went to the Falklands a period of time ago, and I'm not talking like 10, 11 years ago. I'm talking about 5, 6 years ago. We went to the Falklands. Now the Falklands is the fucking arse end of nowhere. It's off. If those that you don't know, it's off the sort of like the southern tip of South America. It is a very hostile and unforgiving place. We rocked up there. Now, it might have been a feeling of mine, but when you're working with a team of guys that have been in the military for quite some time, you expect these cats to know what they're doing. They know what they need. As long as we've got the basics, anything after that is their own prerogative. But I had one guy go all the way down to the Falklands. I said, right, okay, lads, get your sleeping systems out. We'll get a few hours head down. Everybody pulls out their big sleeping bags, your big green maggot. And this fucking one idiot pulled out a jungle sleeping bag that's about as insulated as a fucking pillowcase. But
Right.
I pulled him to one side and I said, right, okay. I said, I like treating my team like adults. I said, it's proved to me that now there's an element of distrust there. I don't know whether you just thought, Baz won't check, fuck it. I'll just take this sleeping bag. Because at the end of the day, mate, you're going to fucking sleep in that for the next X amount of months until you procure another one. But guess what? I don't want to hear you're bitching about it once because then there's going to be an issue, you know. And from that moment on, this one team member, I had to treat like a child because there's that element of trust that's been lost, you know. And
Well, it's
not
the
everybody's set up to live out a box and a bag effectively. Some people do need that additional sort of like um, element of I need to check what you're doing. You
right.
know,
That's the winching is almost inexcusable. I mean, I fucked up one time going to the field, and I learned from it. Do you think I winched? Hell no. I was lucky. I had, what the Marine Corps calls a woolly pulley, the Army calls just a sweater. Um, I was able to survive. Um, it was only for like a week, but guess what? That taught me. I was trying to prove a point by going super light. Super light. I can do that now because technology is caught up to everything else where it can keep you drier, warmer, this, that, and the other. But back then, you just had wool, and I still am a firm believer in wool, and this will shock people. Even if it's wet, it's the only thing I've found that will keep you warm, even while wet. And I'm sure I just blew people away on my page, but wool is not a bad thing. Polyester, all the little microfibers. I have not yet worn one that will keep me warm when I'm wet, but I have found my wool long johns, union suits for you guys out there, either in construction or in England. With the flat back, the one piece, keep you
yeah,
warm. They're wool. Also, wool inner jackets. Layering. Cold, and you know what cold means. So these are just things we have to deal with, and if people don't know that, look up the Cold Weather Survival Manual that the U.S. Army puts out. It's super easy. I did spend a year on Indak, Alaska, TC 21-3, and it's the Soldier's Handbook for Individual Operations and Survival in Cold Weather Areas. And that will be your guide on layering, all that. You'll find out what the acronym COLD means. So I don't just want to get into all that, but that's situational specific, right? And that's cold weather. But in the jungle, would you want to have all that shit with you in the jungle? Maybe a jacket, maybe something to keep your core temperature up if it rains. But I don't really know if everything else, the wool pants, this, that, and the other, I don't know if everything else would be proper. Your thoughts?
yeah. I've spent quite a bit of time in the jungle, and it's wool rots. Quite quickly. In the jungle,
Just like
but
leather.
yeah, yeah. So it's I found very quickly that in the jungle, fighting light is the way to go. You've all I've got to say is other things like the jungle, you've got to get used to being wet. Like we used to do wet and dry drills. That means you're operating in your wet kit during the day. Then when you were getting into your
Yep.
sort of like in your A-frame in the night, you were putting your dry kit on. And then in the morning, what you do, you get up and you take your dry kit off. You'd put it away because obviously we have waterproof all our kit, and you put your wet kit back on. And there's nothing worse than putting wet kit on that's still wet. It's sticky to your body. It's full of twigs and thorns and shit like that. And your body's
Yep.
sore where you've got like lesions where leeches have been onto you. You've got blisters. You scrubbed your cut because if your cuts in the jungle just fester and they become sore and infected. So it's really difficult.
Getting
And
that good
so
old cellulitis, brother.
Yeah. And after a while, there is no wet and dry drills. It's just wet and wet drills. It's just you put it on the less wetter shit you've got, if you know. And again, that living out of a box and a bag, you quickly learn, especially somewhere in the jungle where it's not temperate weather like it is in the States, or sort of like the like northwestern sort of states and places like that, and northeastern states,
Yep.
very much Eastern and Northern Europe and places like that, and the UK, where you take a lot of kit because you don't need to worry about sweating as much.
But
You know,
you get the piss off rains, the rains where it drenches you quickly, and then the sun comes out and beams on you. Indonesia and Singapore were the two places that proved that out to me hard, and that's where your lightweight kit came in. You know,
mm,
your oh, why am I mind dumping what it's called? The stuff. No matter what you get the. It's got the squares in it, man. It's the. Oh, why am I mind dumping this shit? It's
like,
ripstop.
like, yeah,
Ripstop. Yeah, the
yeah.
nylon. Yeah.
Like microfiber stuff's good for the
Yes.
jungle as well.
Yes. Yes.
Like we used to obviously our old combat uniform. We used to have like a jungle version of it that got called junglies. Funny enough, and junglies were sort of like it was a status symbol. If you had a set of junglies, it meant that you'd done time in the jungle, and people looked at you a bit different. A bit like if you
Like
in the
the
state if the state in the states if you blouse your trousers because you're a paratrooper, it's that status symbol, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean?
yep.
So if you were cutting around with junglies on, people would be going like this fucking cool motherfucker here. And it was sort of a status symbol. I mean, you'd see lads cutting around with junglies on, even if they were nowhere near the jungle. Much to the chagrin of some sergeant majors and regimental sergeant majors, depending on your unit. But again, it's you learn quickly what was best for you in what environment and what
Right.
you put in that box and bag. You know, in the jungle, I found quickly that look, I could take all the kit in the world, but I'm going to be lugging it about in some of the most inhospitable terrain on the planet, where it takes basically 2 or 3 hours to go a kilometre. You know, not just because the navigation's difficult, just because of the terrain.
The
You're going to
footing.
be,
Yep.
yeah, you're going to be chafing.
Slogging.
So,
Yep.
so it's like I'm going to take two sets of uniform, and I'll wear them until they rot off me, And I'm sure at that point, at some time, we'll get a resupply where, oh look, I need some more uniform. Your boots in the jungle are very like in like say in the US when you're on training, or in the UK when we're on training, you can pretty much pick any boot off the shelf, commercial off the shelf, that will do the job. In the jungle, not so, because it
Not
needs
so
to be a
much.
certain, yeah, it needs to be a certain type of boot. It
It's
needs to
got
be
a drain. It's
It's got to drain. It's got to have non-gathering soles. As in, what I
yep.
mean by that is the grips don't
Panama
have much.
soles. Yep.
Yeah, sort of like, yeah, like the big chunky sort of soles where there's not much grip. Sorry, not much tread. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean,
Right.
brother, don't you?
Right.
So it's all about that. And then you find after a while that after you've done 3 or 4, even 3 or 4 days in the jungle, never mind 3 or 4 weeks, that your back is bleeding and raw
Yep.
because of the kit that you're carrying. And I don't care who you are, you will throw everything away just to lose a kilo off your back.
Yep.
So that lesion is not rubbing for the fucking 15th hour of that day you've got your kit on your back. So
Yep.
again, in the jungle, we especially certainly me, I became quite adept at taking what I really needed, and that was ammunition and water. Ammunition, water,
That's it.
machete.
Yep.
Sweat rags. I used to take a lot of sweat rags and a shit ton of zinc oxide tape.
If you if
Just
you if you don't have a machete, it's always good to have yourself a kukri.
yeah,
Or I've told people this
a parang.
a parang, or in America they make something called the SP8, which is Spec Plus 8. It's a survival machete, is what they call it. But it's like a 13-inch blade. It has a flat surface on the front that's sharpened for digging. And really, honestly, if you need to dig cow, honestly, in the jungle, if you're in the water, I have seen so many people cut the seams of their drawers, and not wear underwear, free ball, and just squat into the fucking jungle water and take a shit and drive on, or a piss. It's a different world. But see, that's where civility changes a little bit.
Yeah, it's I found in the jungle. Have you seen the Lycra cycling shorts?
Yep.
I used to wear those in the jungle because one, they're light, they're made out of lycra, so they dry really quickly.
Yep.
They don't chafe. They hug your balls, so your balls aren't swinging to and fro and getting obviously infection in your groins and shit like that. And because they're quite, I won't say tight, but they're fitted, that there's less chance of you getting a leech on your nutsack,
Well,
which is.
you just need those because your balls clank when you walk.
I'm not saying that, brother.
Yeah.
Uh,
Look, we're gonna have to insert humor into a lot of this stuff. Here's the whole point: is we're gonna have to do another show on this. But I really appreciate you dropping by tonight, and
Pleasure,
you're
brother.
very busy, brother. And at least I know the people are getting a no bullshit thing, and you call me out when I misspeak. Look, I did. I still have the jacket. I kept the wool jacket with me always. I still have it. It was Army issue. I even used it in the Marine Corps. And it was because it would keep me warm, even wet. But I do remember after leaving a jungle situation one time that the bottom started to fray. And my leather belt, I actually was wearing a leather belt like a moron, which I wasn't supposed to do. It rotted quickly, and at that point, but there was none of this fancy lycra, none of that stuff was invented yet. But it did its job. But yeah, the way you sleep off the ground, just like you said, in the bag or box that I have shown, I have a sleeping system that back in the day, I have both of them almost next to each other. One, they call it an IMPS net. You used to buy it by U.S. Cavalry. And it's a net that could be a cot. It could be, or not a cot, but where you could sleep off the ground, tied between two trees.
Hammock, yeah.
Yeah, a hammock. And also, it could be something to catch fish. Everything should be looked at with all the purposes. If not fish for eating, it could catch fish for bait because it was so small with their openings. So the point being is, look at any kit you get with the eye to more than one use. Hell, this will make you laugh your dick off. I have something from the 1970s, a pocket fisherman. I carried that the entire time, just like my Buckmaster. It was always in my pack. If I had to fish, I also had the survival fishing kit that the U.S. military issued. What do you call them? Air crewmen. And that's really, you just got to be self sufficient because you never know what can happen. And if the worst case scenario happens, you have to be prepared for it. And honestly, ounces, like you just said earlier, ounces are pain. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this conversation is ounces are pain. We can go in more depth, but you please finish it out.
Yeah, so I think what we're getting at is each person has their own ideas, is their own philosophies, their own mantras that they work by when they go away. I've just spent 2 weeks away on a job that wasn't in a hostile environment. It was a very short contract that I won't get into, but it had military applications to it. And I spent 2 weeks in a fucking hotel, and I still packed as if I was doing 6 months in Afghanistan because it's just habit, overpacking. I've always overpacked, um, unless I was going somewhere like Equatorial New Guinea, Belize, Borneo, Brunei, where I was going to spend time in the jungle, and then you pack accordingly. But usually, when you don't know sort of like what you're getting into, you tend to overpack. Um, and it's up to you or what you do. If you overpack, you overpack. But remember, at the end of the day, like we've said, ounces of pain. You've got to carry it about. Um, And I think that's all I'll say on that matter, brother. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you on one of these shows again quite soon.
Oh yeah, we're gonna definitely have to do this within the next. Hopefully, you're not busy. The next week, we will finish this one up. We still have to finish another show up on contracting versus mercenary, but as everybody can see, I'm not able to move a lot of pictures because I started building too much space. So I had to collapse everything within my wall, and all those pictures are gone now. So that just happens to be one of those happy, joyous moments that we all share together. But remember, surround yourself with those on the same mission, always. And the other thing I will tell you, you will always have sneaky people doing creepy shit. You may not see them wearing something dark and sexy, doing funky poaching. There's always a reason people are doing things. And just like I said, there is something afoot that we're all. Oh, there goes my dogs. They want to act a fool. Isn't it awesome how my dogs do, brother? So, you want to close it out before I play? I'm going to play the Legionnaire song, just a bit of it on the way out. So, before I'll close out once you close out, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, brother. Yeah, just to close out what you said there. Uh, the people that they're going to do you sort of like harm or mean you harm or are trying to collect from you are never the guys in the tactical stuff. It's the guy with the checked shorts, with the big brimstone hat that looks like a tourist.
On the
You know,
golf course or the bowling alley or
yeah,
fucking
yeah.
playing pool.
Look, looking at watches, picking up the newspaper. Never the one with the big camera pointed at you. You know, so element of paranoia. We all have an element of paranoia, but it's that situational awareness that's going to keep your edge honed, and hopefully combat those that are out to combat you. Yeah, that's all I've got to say, then, bro. It's been a pleasure, and I'll speak to you soon.
That's always the best way, brother. Thank you guys for stopping by Kaiser's Castle today. You have heard another episode of me and Baz talking real shit. We will do another one very soon. He's an epic dude, one that I respect highly. Uh, that just all. That's where I'll leave it there. And look, thank you for sitting on my big orange couch, drinking your coffee, tea, your soda, your adult libation. And I'm going to slowly raise the drawbridge to Kaiser's Castle. And thank you all for coming so you can get out because it's time to put this show to bed. And I really appreciate your time. With that being said, Shuff out.